Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to make something with clay. We are actually going to make a little decorated jar. Now I've made many of these over the years. There's one back there. I have a shop online called ThyWitchsKitchen where I make this kind of decor, and I recycle old boxes and old pieces of furniture and turn them into something whimsical and magical related to paganism, or if you're a Wiccan. And I used to sell a lot of this stuff online. I don't sell as much anymore, but I do still make it. So I'm going to take you through the steps on how I create something like this with a project today. Today we are going to be working with polymer clay. I've already been messing with stuff today, so my hands are disgusting. My tutorial for pagan runes on this channel was to do with that little side business, and one of the things that I make a lot of are these things here. I like to take old jars that you would normally throw away, bottles, anything glassware, candle holders, and recycle them into something a bit more witchy, a bit more cutesy, like these. And today I'm going to show you how to do that with, now I actually have two of these tiny little jars. I thought they were adorable. Now I don't worry too much about cleaning this part for now. Make sure it's not got food residue or anything. It's had a clean originally, but things like the stickiness, it doesn't matter right now because primarily it's the lid that we're going to work on. And anything that I put on the glass I tend to make removable because I like to be able to take my storage jars and properly clean the glass part. So I try and bear that in mind when I make these little things. Now I am pretty crap with clay, so I use molds, and I've made a few molds of stuff I've sculpted myself, but for this little thing I think we're just going to use some bog standard molds from eBay and AliExpress, and you can see how I do my little witchy jars. Okay, so I just use ordinary silicone molds that I get from places like eBay, Amazon, AliExpress or Wish. And I use the skin coloured Sculpey clay, condition it before I use it. The first thing I do is cover my lid in a little bit of translucent clay, liquid clay, and I rub it really thin. You can see it's like barely a sheen. And my first layer of clay is just, I'd started this already but my camera like didn't record, is just a thin sheet that I'm gonna mold to my lid, and this is the basis to attach all the other clay to. So you want to start in the middle and push all the air bubbles out before you actually push it down. You just want to mold it as best you can all the way around the lid. So once I've molded it in, I tend to pull it in past where I need it to go, just to make sure it's completely stretched, and then use a blade on the inside. Like so. And then just neaten up your edges. Now don't worry about this too much here, because at the end before we bake everything we trim the edges. Sometimes they get a bit stretched. So this is the base on which you're going to make all your little shapes. So to use these, what I do is I really condition my clay so it's really soft, as soft as you can get it. And then I take a little bit, stuck my nail in that, and I roughly get it to the shape of the mold. And then I'll squish it in there. It's way too much clay. I'll squish it in quite ruthlessly, getting all the little bits. Then I'll take my roller and I'll roll it. As you can see, that helps a lot. And then gently just scrape away the top layers. that is excess, I'll make sure it had another little roll. You just want it as neat as possible. And I just repeat this until I make sure it's very flat. Now for this you want molds that are very soft silicone, that bend really well. Then to get your piece out, you want to carefully go around all the edges of your mold and stretch it out, and then literally just gently pop it out without distorting any of the details, like so. Then you want to position it sort of where it's going to go. I don't adhere to anything properly until I've done all the designs. I think I'm going to put a little cloud on this. So that once again is a perfect. And because you're using the roller, it gets every single detail. So I want that one to go like this. There's my second star. I think I'm going to put this one maybe up here. And I'm just going to gently just put it in place, put them back in shape. Okay, so I've got my trim on, I've got my pieces, I moved this star to here. The next thing I do is texturize and adhere everything properly. So the first thing is adhering everything. You really want to be careful where you hold things, and you just want to go around all the edges and any of that sticky out clay that's not part of your design, that came from not trimming it off. You can use that to adhere the edges down. Anywhere that doesn't have that, you just want to take a very slim, skinny part of the edge and press that down. Now that will leave marks in your clay, which I actually don't care about, because what I do at the end is I'll go around and dot into my entire piece like this to texturize it all over as my background, because it looks really cute once it's painted and we do a little bit of the aging. Now a little tip when you are working on your lid is to put it back on your jar so you've got something to hold on to. And if you feel that your clay starts getting too soft and it's getting too easy to make a mess, put it in your fridge or your freezer for a little while just to cool it straight back down, and it'll harden up a little bit. Okay, so once I've got to this point, this is where I take smaller tools like dotting tools and I start adding in any details that I want. So for example, these are all different sizes because some got distorted, so I'm going to even them all up by pressing into every single one. And I'm just going to go around my piece and I'm just going to look for little areas that could just have some little detail added. So my jar doesn't just look all top heavy with the lid, what I normally do is make something matching that will hang as a tag on my jar, and I use chains around my jar. I'll show you. If you looked at the pictures at the start, most of them have some kind of tag. So all I do is I pick something from the mold which is similar, maybe one of the clouds. Okay, so I'm actually going to mold this on the glass, and this will come off easy when I bake it. And that is going to be my tag backing. I can texturize the whole surface of this. Now because this is going to be my tag, I'm also going to put 2 substantial size holes for adhering this later. And the reason you want to do this on the glass is you want to shape it to the glass, so when it's hanging on its little chains it lies perfectly. I added a star to my cloud and a couple of little stars here and put holes in them for attaching later. So I'd say that's everything for the clay front. Okay, so the crystals I use are glass crystals. I have them in every colour. These are all coloured ones, and these are just the AB ones. And these are pointed at the back. I'm just going to be using the AB ones for this. Just pick up the crystals using a little tiny little bit of liquid clay on my silicone tool. Just a tiny little bit to make it sticky, and they get cleaned at the end. And I'm just going to push them down into my clay so that the edges get nice and wedged in there. And then I just give them a little tiny wipe. Okay, so I'm going to bake this per the manufacturer's instructions for however long it should be. And then once it is baked, I'm going to leave it to completely cool. I should add that when you bake it, you can leave it on your jar to bake, but unscrew it. You do not want your jar closed, because you want the air to be able to escape so it doesn't explode. Okay, so everything's nice and cooled down. I didn't need to go back and trim anything. Now to paint it, I actually leave these on the glass. The glass is cleanable. It's much easier to hold this like this. I'm going to use a bunch of different sized paint brushes. And I'm going to be using my gouache colors, gouache, I think that's how you say it, from Arteza. You can use acrylic paints, but I prefer these because they're matte, they're a bit thinner, they have a, now I like them really watery, and it's a good practice if you're doing this is to get your paints quite watery first. You can always build up the layers, but you won't lose the details if your paint is really thin to begin with. Now we're not going to worry about painting over anything, because we start with the back, the furthest back layer, so we can get into all those details, and we can always cover the stuff nearest to us when we get to painting that. Right now you're just concentrating on getting to all the crevices of the main back colour. And don't forget, if you've got the same colour down here to match it up, even though this is a cloud shape, I think I'm still going to make this bit the sky colour. I'm going to take just little dabs of my other colours, and I'm just going to start tapping them in randomly over this entire thing. Yeah, make that a bit lighter, probably a bit too light. I'm going to put some of the purple colours in the light areas so you see them more. And if you feel that you've got too much paint in the areas, you can always just go in and soak it back out. Right, so once you have your background colour, you're going to dry it quite thoroughly. So once you have completely dried your first layer, you can let it cool down. I usually don't even wait. I usually just go straight in with my next. So once you have your next colours, you're literally just going to paint things one at a time, being as careful as you can. You always start the furthest away back and work your way to the front, so it doesn't matter if you need to get into small details of something at the front, you can paint over it. And this will take a few coats. I water mine down so that it's thin, so that I can build up the coverage without losing any details. And as for the gemstones, I just paint straight over them, because later on we can uncover them with a blade and some patience. Now, because this is gouache, which is reactivated by wet paint, my first few layers is going to take the blue into it. If you don't want that happening, if you're using gouache, you can actually do in between coats of something like really watered down Mod Podge or matte sealer, but I've never really had a problem with just keeping on working on the layers. It usually just starts covering. See, I'm not caring about getting paint all over my star because it's one of the front pieces. It means that it will get painted last. Right, now while that is drying, I'm going to do my cloud with a white coat. It might look a bit horrendous in the first few coats as all these paint colours are not opaque, but it will start coming together and you'll start to really see something cool. Resting your finger on things really helps when it comes to stabilizing your hand, doing small details. Once you've given it another first coat, dry it again. Trust me, it will go through a phase of looking like an absolute mess. Just persevere. And if you're really not good at painting fine details like this, you could always do this with coloured clay. I just prefer to paint everything because I like to add shading in places, but you could totally do this with coloured clay. Now as you go, any little bits that you've messed up and touched on your base colour, you just go in and touch them up too. And these things just take time. This is the beauty of these little jars though. I like them to be time consuming so they feel more special. So I'm going to give it all its colour coats. For the trimmer and the edge, I think I'm going to paint them the brown colour because they will probably end up gold too. Once I've got all the colours on, I'll come and show you what I do next. I thought I'd show you how I get these raised details. I literally load my paintbrush with paint and dab it on its side, so it only gets the most raised parts of my trim. Okay, so now I've got all my main colours painted. I'm going to take a really thin acrylic wash, acrylic sealant, and cover all my colours really thinly just to seal them, because this is gouache paint and it is really easy to reactivate it. You'll see I'm going to start just with the blue first, try that, then cover the next. If you're using acrylic paint, you don't need to do this. Acrylic paint does not reactivate itself. So I'm going to give everything a little seal, dry it all before we do the next. Okay, once everything is completely dry, you're going to mix up a black wash. Now I'm doing it with acrylic paint because we want this not to be able to bleed. And I'm using quite a big brush. And I'm going to put a bit of water in there and make this really liquidy. A bit more liquidy than that. You want it so that it's quite runny. And you want to arm yourself with some baby wipes at the ready. And you just want to do this a little bit at a time. So you're going to literally cover everything with your black wash, like so. And then you're going to rub it off again. We can also at this time remove this from the glass. So you just literally just want to get an edge. They come off so easy, as you can see, because we want these to dry thoroughly. And I'm taking this off the glass. Now look, I can just go and clean this now. I can take it to the sink. I can take a scrubber to it. It literally will clean up so easily. Okay, so now with a very squared off brush or a very stiff brush, I like to take a little of my main metallic colour, which is a copper, and really practically take it off. And I just go into the background in places and just brush it on to just highlight some of that background, bring some colour, and then across my cloud, across here, I'm just bringing some of that bronze colour. So this is what it ends up looking like. Oh, I did a bit too much there, so. And you can always bring it back if you think you do too much. Just add your lighter colours to your fingers. But it's the aged look that I'm going for. Now, these need to be completely bone dry before we seal them and take off the paint off the gemstones. And with these, I normally clean up any extra paint sticking out the sides, and I usually give these a black coat. This is acrylic paint I'm using on the backs. I'll take a couple of coats of black. Okay, I use this, which is Rust-Oleum Crystal Clear Gloss Finish. It's a spray. I take it outside, spray it out there and leave it out there to cure for a couple hours. Then I bring them in the heat, and I usually leave them overnight somewhere warm. Okay, I've left this overnight to dry, as you can see. So now I'm going to uncover the gemstones, and it's really easy. You need a really sharp knife. This is for paper cutting, and you find the edge of your rhinestone and you basically cut round in a circle, and I've just managed to catch the paint there. Cut round in a circle. I am really pants at this kind of thing. It comes off. Now don't worry if, like me, you've just uncovered half your ornament. You can always touch this up. And I just like to go around the edges and clean them up a bit more until you reveal the entire crystal. Okay, there we go, sparkly. The way I attach my pieces of clay for the front of my jars with findings is to use head pins. Now I have bronze ones. I put them through from the back, like so. I bend them up and then back again, and you want to cut them to quite a short size. And then I use round nose pliers to bring a loop to the front. I think that's still a bit long. They don't need to be overly big. Then you just bring your loop to the front, and it makes it a perfect little hanging charm for your jar. And I start by fitting one end of my chain to the biggest piece. Then I figure out how it's going to sit nicely without coming off. Okay, and you should be able to slide it over your jar. I like to call these jar jewellery, because I guess that's what they are. So it's on my chain. Then I'm going to decide where this one's going to hang. So I'm going to put this one quite near the front. And it's the same thing again with any beads. You just want to take head pins. Keep all your head pins the same colour that match your theme. Now these ones I'm putting on together. Put on your head pins. Now the one that you want at the bottom should go on first. You bend it at the top, cut it off, and then just loop it back on itself. I cannot see. Loop it back on itself using your round nose pliers. You do that with them all before we position them. This is how it looks. And then you can use this to store all your little witchy things. I think I might have them on back to front again after I adjusted everything. Store all your little witchy things. This one's a tiny one. It is so much easier when you're doing bigger jars. This one was really fiddly because it was small. And then your little charm necklace comes off. So does your lid, so you can wash your actual jar. And for cleaning the inside of the jar lid, I suggest if you ever have to clean this, just use warm soapy water, towel it, pat it dry really well, and air dry it, and it should always remain in good condition. There we go. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I'll see you in the next video.